Hey everyone, I've had a lot of people asking me for an update on health stuff. I recently had a cardiac ablation, and prior to the cardiac ablation, I watched a lot of testimonial videos like this, and they helped me a lot. They helped me to feel more comfortable with everything, sort of put my mind at ease, so I thought I would make my own video like this and hopefully help somebody else put their mind at ease, and also just to give my friends and family sort of an update on what's going on. So I'll start at the beginning. Back in probably about a year ago, it's February 2019 right now, January, February 2018, I started noticing some pretty severe heart palpitations. I would just be sitting around, or oftentimes when I would feel them, I would be laying down, just like laying in bed or something like that. You can feel your heartbeat a little easier when you're laying down. And I would notice just sort of a rapid fluttering heartbeat for 5 to 10 seconds or so, and then sort of a bit of a pause, and then a really hard beat right after the pause, and then it would return to a normal rhythm. I was under some stress, work was a bit busy, I was drinking a lot of caffeine. I used to drink probably 3 or 4 cups of coffee and some soda every day, and so I was like, I'm going to cut back on caffeine, I'm going to try to manage my stress a little better, I'm going to make sure I sleep better, and just try to get these palpitations under control. So I cut out caffeine completely. One of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Took about a week, started on like a Thursday. I had a Friday off, and I just gave up caffeine cold turkey and had a miserable migraine and an awful weekend. Right around Monday or Tuesday when I was getting back to work, things were better and I was managing it all right. So I cut out caffeine completely, was trying to sleep better, was trying to manage my stress better, and was still getting the palpitations, but they seemed to be a little bit better. But I decided to go into my doctor anyway. So I went in and talked to my PCP, my primary care physician, and was just explaining to her everything that was going on. And she advised that I get an ECG done, and also some labs checking thyroid and things like that, just to make sure that things were doing what they were supposed to. The ECG came back good. The labs and everything all came back good. Talked to my doctor again, and she's like, well, it seems like everything's fine. If you'd like, you can get a Holter monitor. It's basically like an ECG that you wear for 24 hours, and we can monitor things. Otherwise, if you want to just call it good for now, you can do that, and we can just monitor it and see how it goes. So I opted to just sort of wait and see. After a little while, the palpitations were getting worse, and I was like, I'm going to get ahead of this. I'm going to get my cardiovascular health under control, get back into shape, get back into running, things like that. So we bought a new treadmill. The new treadmill came with like a Bluetooth chest strap, heart rate monitoring strap. And I have my Apple Watch as well, and I try to keep an eye on my heart rate and things like that, but hadn't really been working out heavily much at that time. So I got back into running, and I was getting to the point where I was running about 5K and felt pretty good, running at about a 10-minute mile. So nothing terribly fast or super strenuous, but I still felt like I was making some pretty good strides there. And I noticed on the treadmill that the heart rate monitor said that I had a heart rate of 220 beats per minute. Verified on my Apple Watch. The Apple Watch agreed. I verified it manually, and manual pulse agreed with the Apple Watch and the treadmill. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird, but I'm pretty out of shape. It'll be fine. After that continued for about a week or so, I was like, this isn't normal. A heart rate of 220. And it was a heart rate of 220 combined with the fact that I felt good. Like I could have a conversation with a heart rate of 220. Typically, if your heart rate gets up, above about 180 or so, you feel like you're just gasping and dying. And I didn't. I felt good. I felt as though I was running sort of at an aerobic pace. And so I went back in and I was like, all right, let's order up that Holter. Ordered the Holter and also had an echo done. I, previous to all of this, thought that ECG was short for like echocardiogram. It's not, it's electrocardiogram. The difference between an echo and an ECG is that the ECG is all conductive. It's just pads all over, and they sense sort of the electrical conductivity in your chest and also on, your arms or legs or whatever. The echo is actually like an ultrasound of your heart. So they're looking for structural things. They're looking at the size of things. They're looking to see if the valves are doing what they're supposed to. And in my case, the echo looked good. The size of my heart was good. The valves were all doing what they were supposed to. So that was actually very good news. At that point, we knew that it was just something conductive. The results of the Holter monitor, they diagnosed me with SVT. SVT stands for Super Ventricular Tachycardia. Tachycardia just being like a rapid heart rate. Super ventricular meaning it's a rapid heart rate that originates from somewhere not in the ventricles of the heart. I've got my heart diagram here from the good people at Mayo. So the electrical signal in your heart starts here in the sinus node, and then it goes to the upper chambers of the heart. And from there, the upper chambers of the heart, do their thing. And then that electrical signal hits this right here, the AV node. And the AV node is what sends the signal down into the lower chambers of the heart. And that's how the heart does what it's supposed to do. At that point, the signal is supposed to start over. In some cases, you can get basically like a short circuit in the heart. So the signal that's in the lower chambers of the heart loops back up and around into the upper chambers of the heart and can start over. And that can cause this tachycardia, rapid heart rhythm. That signal can loop in a number of different ways. The way that I had is this right here called AV-NRT, AV node reentry tachycardia, I think is what that stands for. And it's basically the signal looping around in the AV node because it moves faster in some places and slower in some places, and it just causes it to loop. You can also get hot spots up in the atria, and my doctor said that it could be that one or it could be AV-NRT. Ended up being AV-NRT for me. So after I had the Holter done and they diagnosed me with SVT, supraventricular tachycardia, and after I had the echo done, I went in to meet with a cardiologist and just said, what do you think? And he looked at me and he goes, well, I think you're in the wrong clinic. I think you need to go see Dr. Valverde. He is, I forget exactly what his title is, but he works in electrophysiology and cardiology. He's a cardiovascular surgeon. He completed my catheter ablation. So what they do to fix this, there is a short circuit somewhere in your heart. And they need to find it, and then they can eliminate it. So what is done is they insert these long catheters up into your heart. For my case, they went in through the groin. They can sometimes go in through the neck as well. And then they send these catheters up through your veins into your heart, and they have little sensors on them, and they can pace your heart, so they can send impulses to pace the heart. They can also record the electrical impulses, and then one of them will also have the ability to either burn or freeze. In my case, it was burning. And so they pace the heart. They get it to do that rhythm through the use of medication and also pacing the heart. And once they can induce the rhythm and they record it, they map out where that hot spot is, where that reentry point is, and then they burn it away. So he's like, you need to go see Dr. Valverde. So I did. I went over and I talked to him, and we just had discussions around the pros and cons of the procedure and things like that. I should back up a little bit. So when I went in to see the first cardiologist and he said, you're in the wrong clinic, a lot of that came down to the fact that really my options were threefold. I could either ignore it and do nothing. When I was recapping and I was talking to the cardiologist and I mentioned that, he's like, yeah, that's not really an option though. We can't just ignore this. I was fortunate that I was relatively asymptomatic. I didn't get lightheaded. I didn't get dizzy when I had these palpitations, but you still want to take care of it because of the strain that it puts on your heart. So ignore it and do nothing, not really an option. Option number two, or option number one, real option number one, would be medication. They can try to control this through medication. They can try to keep your heart rate down through medication, and there are some that can sort of help control the impulses there. We opted not to do that for a couple reasons, primarily because I'm relatively young and healthy individual and should have a long, healthy cardiovascular life ahead of me, and the medication isn't really a fix. It's trying to control these palpitations, and it's not going to fix them. And he was saying that in my case with my flavor of SVT, that it probably wouldn't help all that much anyway, and I would still be limited in sort of what I could do activity-wise and things like that, and I just wasn't looking forward to spending the rest of my life on heart medication and also not being able to live the kind of life that I wanted to live. And then also because I'm a pilot, general aviation pilot, a lot of those medications will preclude me from being a pilot anymore, whereas with the ablation, it's a fix. They find the spot, they burn it away, and then hopefully it never comes back and the problem's just gone and I can continue to live my life just as I would otherwise. So we opted to go that route. I went to talk to Dr. Valverde and we discussed some of the pros and cons here with the procedure. And he's like, well, the chances of complication are roughly 1 in 100 to 1 in 50. It's 1 to 2%. And I was like, well, that seems awful high. And he's like, yeah, it is, but those are, that's kind of minor complications. I was like, oh, okay, good, minor complications. And then he's like collapsed lung and heart puncture and things like that. And I was like, well, those are minor? And kind of freaked out a little bit. In a lot of my reading, actually, most of the complications from this procedure tend to be like infection related from the entry points, because they're putting these catheters into your veins and those points can end up infected or they can end up, with hematoma or something like that. But yeah, he's like 1 to 2% minor complication, chance of stroke or death, 1 in 1,000. And I was like, that still sounds really high. Like, I know 1,000 people, 1 in 1,000 just isn't, it's not 1 in a million. It's not 1 in 10 million. It's not, any sort of astronomical number. It's a pretty realistic, conceivable number, and that scared me a lot. I had a bit of a cry in the doctor's office, and he's like, "Yeah, you're right. It is high, but that's the number that's published, so that's what we say." I've been doing this a very long time, and I've never seen that happen. And also that number includes a lot of comorbidity and things like that. It includes people who weren't in my shoes. He said, for you are an ideal candidate from a health perspective, from an accessibility perspective. There's a bell curve where 1 in 1,000 is, and you're at one end of that bell curve. And that bell curve includes a lot of people that are in much worse situations than you are. And that made me feel better about the whole thing. Had some conversations with my mother-in-law, who works in electrophysiology as well, and she was saying a lot of the same things. She's like, it's very routine, and pretty much everybody that I talked to seemed to think that this is a pretty routine thing, which made me feel a bit better on the one hand, and also made me feel there was a bit of a lack of empathy around the whole thing in general. If somebody was scared of tying their shoes and you were like, you're being silly, you just tie your shoes. It sort of felt a bit like that, like it's just so routine. There was almost a bit of lack of empathy there, which I understand now is because it's a very safe procedure. So I had the procedure. We scheduled it for right away. I think I had a week and a half to prep or something like that, and just was kind of freaking out, but thought it would be better to just get it done. I had the procedure scheduled for Friday morning. I got to the hospital at 6 a.m, walked in, the nurses were prepping me. So I did some prep on my own beforehand because I knew that I would have pads, ECG pads all over my body. I shaved myself basically from shoulders to knees, because also the catheters that they put into the veins go in the groin area. And from what I've been told, if you don't shave, the nurses will do it for you. And I'd rather take care of that myself. So cleaned everything up from shoulders to knees the night before the procedure. Went in for the procedure, and they checked to make sure that I had already done that and that it was done to their standards. And then they put an IV in my arm, just generally prepped me, put me in the paper gown and all of that kind of stuff. And then I said goodbye to my mom and my wife. My mom came up to help take care of me over the weekend, which was fantastic. Thanks, Mom. Love you. And so I went and said goodbye to, see you later, to my mom and my wife. Then they wheeled me up to where I was going to have the procedure. I walked into the operating room. There was a lot of stuff in there. It was kind of freaky. The table had clamps and things like that to hold me in place, and not clamps, but it's hard to explain, but just sort of these plastic things that kind of came up and over my legs. I was under what's called twilight sedation. It's conscious sedation, so I was not under general anesthesia because they need to try to recreate this heart palpitation when you're on the table. It's hard to do that under general anesthesia. So I was under twilight sedation. I guess I was awake for the whole thing. I don't really remember it at all, which is normal. In seeing some of these videos, a lot of people talked about their experiences during the procedure. I don't remember that at all. All I know is that I laid down and the nurses were all gabbing and having a good time. And one of the nurses goes, "All right, I'm going to give you some medicine so that you don't care about what it is we're talking about here." And they all kind of laughed about it. And then the next thing I remember is they said, "All right, Mike, you're all done. The procedure was a success. We've been trying to recreate the arrhythmia after the ablation and can't." And I said, I was very drowsy, but I said, "Awesome, thank Dr. Valverde for me." And I remember asking if it was AV-NRT because prior to the surgery, Dr. Valverde said it was probably either the AV-NRT or the atrial, the one with the hot spot in the atria. And they go, "Yes, it was AV-NRT." And I was like, "Oh, okay, neat." And then they wheeled me out into the hallway. My wife was there, and she said, "Hey," the nurse said, "You know, you can talk to him a bit." And she goes, "Oh, I'll wait until he's back in the room and more awake." And the nurse goes, "Oh, he's awake now. He can hear you." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm awake. Talk to me." But apparently I sounded like I had cotton in my mouth, and I was just barely conscious at the time. Just really was excited to see them again. And then I don't remember much for a little while until I woke up from a nap and was starving. Because you have to not eat anything after midnight the day before. So I ordered some lasagna and didn't eat much of it at all. Didn't have much of an appetite, although I was very, very hungry, just couldn't eat. And then proceeded to sleep most of the next 2 days. So I slept for a while after the procedure, woke up, took another nap, woke up that evening, took another nap, slept like 11 or 12 hours that night. Had to wake up. The nurse came in to sort of check the entry points and things like that a couple times throughout the night. But other than that, I slept like a baby, 11 or 12 hours. Woke up the next morning, was up for a little bit, took another nap, got discharged at like 8:30 in the morning, went home, took a 2-hour nap, got up, ate some food, took another 2-hour nap, got up for a little while longer, and slept for about 11 hours again that night. So it's currently Friday, so it's been, I guess, a week now since I've had the procedure, and I'm finally starting to get to the point where I'm not just absolutely exhausted from any little thing, although we went to the mall yesterday so I could just get out and feel a bit human again and walk, and we were at the mall for like an hour, and I got home and 8:30 at night last night, fell asleep. I'm normally up until about midnight and was just exhausted. Wife and I were going to watch something on Netflix, and I just passed out and then woke up about 5 minutes later, and I was like, I'm going to go and sleep in the bed instead of on the couch here. So yeah, that sort of brings us to today. I'm glad I had it done. I don't have the palpitations anymore, which has been interesting, to be honest. I was so used to having them, and I just don't have them anymore. I've been getting little single beat palpitations every now and then now, which I've been told is very, very normal. Those nerves fire as they're healing, and because they burned right on the AV node, that's causing just some nerves to sort of fire and trigger as they heal and scar. But the re-entry path is no longer valid, so I'm not getting kicked into that SVT for minutes at a time anymore like I used to. Just single beats every now and then, which I've been told is normal. I'm still on lifting restrictions. We've gotten almost 2 feet of snow over the last 3 days. My wife and neighbors have been clearing it all. I haven't been able to help with any of that, which has been rough. It's been good. I'm glad I had it done. I was very nervous, but I'm feeling a lot better about it now. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully this makes you feel better if you're going to be going through this. Feel free to reach out if you have questions, if I can maybe help ease your mind at all, but definitely also talk to your doctor. they know a lot more than I do. Yeah, thanks.